Hello and welcome to another episode of Common Nonsense with me, Kevin LaRussa. Today, I'm going to be talking about the public school system, but before we get into that, I just want to remind y'all to go check me out at libertyrevoltmedia.com. Not just me, the whole crew of Bucky and Cole are over there as well. It's a huge crew of three. We're putting out we're trying to get more content out there, obviously, all the time. Schedule's kind of getting in the way, but trying to work around it. We got Cole leaving off for another country here soon. I won't say it so that they don't try to keep him out of their borders. We got a new line of CBD out, Liberty Organic CBD. Go check it out at libertyrevoltmedia.com. And just trying to continue spreading this message of liberty out there. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our pages. Send out if you like the content I'm putting out. Afternoon to Kathy and Rhonda. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoy the content I put out or enjoy seeing me on other shows, the easiest way to contribute or do anything is just tell your friends, get my name out there, get the Liberty Revolt out there. You can follow me on Twitter at the Coors Fairy. I am incredibly inactive. That's something that I'm going to be working on here in the future. So I think I have like 10 followers and like 10 posts all time, and I've had the account for maybe 5 years now. I don't really use the Twitter, but I'm trying to get more involved there. But yeah, no, just trying to get the message of liberty out there. We're going to have some good interviews coming up, hopefully on the show on Saturdays here up in Northern Colorado, and on the live stream, you're going to be able to watch watch us on KHNC 1360. We're going to be doing a radio show now, the Liberty Revolt radio show from 5 to 6 Mountain Time every Saturday. Catch me, Bucky, and Cole on there, spreading again the language of liberty to everyone who's willing to listen. So be on the lookout for that. And, be on the lookout for more podcasts with people like the Be the Change crew trying to expand there. So be on the lookout for more new content coming your way. Again, we're just trying to fight the fight. We're trying to get our voices out there. We're trying to bring reason to this incredibly unreasonable time that we are living in, and trying to re-sow these divides, or repair these divides that have been driven between us. So on the topic of divides being driven between us, today I'm going to be talking about the public school system and why it is always going to be the number one target. It is one of the most vital institutions in American life for many, many, many people on the left and right, especially for the political elites. Why it is that the public education system holds this, what its influences are, what it means, and how it's gotten to the point where it is today, where there is little to no trust, especially from one particular side in the public education sphere. So that's going to be our show today. Like I said, like, share, subscribe, and let's get to it. So, public education in America, why is it important? Well, it's important because an educated populace is the key to a successful populace. So, normally, if you look throughout history, the more educated your people are, the better off your society is going to be. The more people you can get into institutions of education, the better. If you look at, Athens, you look at Rome, these nations had a lot of emphasis on getting educated in order to get anywhere, and that didn't necessarily mean what we see in form of education. It just meant through some form of trade school, some form of school in politics or something like that. But over time, we have accepted the truth that an educated society is normally going to be a successful society. And that remains true to this day. And you see it all the time in America. So what happened, though, to the education system? Well, it has been co-opted, and it has been seen as the tool for control that it unfortunately can be if not wielded properly. And by all metrics, it is not being wielded properly here in America. So if you are on the left or the right, there is an acknowledgement and understanding that what the public school system provides, especially when you're talking about kids, is basically it raises your kids for you. If you're a parent in America from the ages of 5 until 18, you normally outside of like specific months, you have basically a daycare from the age from the morning till mid-afternoon that you can send your kid off to, and it helps alleviate a lot of the responsibility of child rearing. And up until about the 1850s, child rearing was the only thing that ever really happened in life. Very few people, very few kids actually had the opportunity to go off and get educated. And so what you see now is this tacit acknowledgement that schools have a lot of influence. There's a very specific reason for that influence, and that influence it provides is a very dangerous tool, weapon that can be wielded against that can be easily wielded against your political opposition, especially in a place like America, but basically really anywhere. So the uh, the current American system is modeled after what many know as the Prussian system, and it was just a way of doing schooling. As you see now, you send your kids off from the morning till night. They're in a specific room with specific teachers being taught specific things on very direct schedules. There's little leeway in what really is the amount of freedoms that are allowed to be had. Kids are forced to do very unkidly things such as sitting still and paying attention to individual subjects for extended periods of time. And then once they hear the bell ring, that's their sign. Hey, I can go out and I get my freedom back for a little bit. And then, the bell rings again and your freedom's gone. It's very similar to how industry in America worked. You would go into work, you'd be spending long amount of times doing singular subjects that required all of your, singular actions that required all of your attention. And there's a reason why they are very similar. It's because the Prussian model was a very good way to prepare your working class kids for the industrial life that was going to be ahead of them, life on the assembly line, life in a manufacturing facility. And so it presented this. Now, the reason why it spawned is because up until about the mid 1840s, 1850s, most schooling in America was done by private religious institutions, normally your Catholic churches or your Protestant churches or what have you. But at that time, it was Catholic or Protestant, not much in between. And there was, according to some interpretations, what really led to the switch from private school to public school was the influx of um, Catholic immigrants, specifically Irish immigrants, in the early 1800s. You got about a couple million new Irish immigrants, and the thing is that they were all Catholic. And there was at the time there was a belief that if you were Catholic, that meant that your loyalty was to the Pope above all. And if you know anything about European history, specifically from basically the years 500 until about 1700, the Pope had a lot of power, and papal supremacy had a lot of sway with a lot of very powerful elites. What the church said had a lot of sway in your day-to-day life. So there was a lot of belief that loyalty to the Pope before the people around you could lead to very serious problems and could lead to the degradation of your society if the Pope says, hey, this society is not okay to continue the way it is. And so what happened is you had a lot of Protestants starting to realize, wait a second, we're getting a huge influx of Catholics going to Catholic schools specifically, and they didn't like this, especially since there was a lot of money. There wasn't a lot of money in education from the government that days. It was normally done on local levels. Your local government, your local city government would give some money to the local school to help keep it around. But the Protestants didn't like that their money was going to Catholics. And they saw a big, huge problem with it. And many Protestants probably would have liked that a Protestant government was stood up rather than the secular one that we have. But the next best option was to make it so that these Catholic children had to go to Protestant schools. Now, the way this worked was that the Protestants kind of dominated society at the time. If you're unaware, the Catholics, especially the Irish and the Scotch, were seen at the same level as black slaves. They were both considered lesser than. Neither one of them was considered white, despite the fact that we all know that Irish people and Scottish people probably have the palest skin in the world. But it shows you that white wasn't necessarily a skin thing. It was more of a class designator. So because these Protestants controlled the government by forcing Catholic students away from Catholic school and into public school, where they could then control the curriculum, these public Protestant schools now taught from the King James Version of the Bible. They taught Protestant hymns. They taught Protestant beliefs. They basically enforced Protestantism, but they did it through government power, government regulation. They got the government to set up secular agnostic schools that at the time were dominated by Protestants. However, this shifts with time. Once you allow the government to enter an industry, in this case, education, boy, it never goes away, and it does everything it can to seize as much authority. So what you see not long after that, by the early 1900s and stuff, is basically there is no more Protestant education. It is secular, and it is moving towards one to prepare you for life as an industrial worker. And this government control, what it was realized almost immediately was like, wow, if we have these kids in this classroom for the most important 13 years of their development, we can really get away with, like, we can really shape the future. We can really start to dictate where our culture goes. By teaching them young, by the time they get to the workforce, these ideas are so ingrained in them that they're, no matter what they hear at a place like college, it's not going to matter, because this is already their core foundational belief system. And so what you end up seeing is that the education industry begins to really start to skew towards government control. Now, at the time, this didn't mean leftist control. This didn't mean communist, right? That comes later. But what matters is it became accepted that children were to be educated by the government from the ages of basically 5 until 18 in what amounts to a monopoly on education. They understood the fact that basically only prior to the public education system, only rich kids or people whom the church had pity on could really go to school. And what the public education system allowed for was everyone gets access to school. And when it started as everyone is allowed access, it soon became everyone is mandated presence. So you very quickly lost the ability as a parent to dictate whether or not your child goes to school, because again, the government likes having that power. People in power enjoy keeping power. And so around the 1910s, 1920s and stuff, you start to notice a shift. It wasn't really until, the 1940s, 50s that the school system really became a target of truly nefarious foreign forces, if you will. So our story on why the public education system now is so broken really begins around this time. Now, you'd always had more of a liberal bias in academia, because people who are more conservative tend to want to go out and work on their own, whereas people who are more liberal tend to be more open to the idea of teaching and nurturing the youth of the next generation, spreading their skills out to other people to learn and everything like that. So you're always going to have more of a left lean in education. But where we're at now, where according to studies by the Heterodox Academy and others, we have about, let me share this with you guys really quick, where we have about a 5-to-1 at best ratio of liberal to conservative thought in universities, and that's like the rolling average. Some of these institutions, particularly the ones that are, let's see here. Nope, that is absolutely not what I want. Let's see if I can get this to work. Okay. So some of the institutions, right, are relatively normal. You're seeing a 5-to-1, but Jesus, that is horrible. I'm just going to get rid of that. I'm going to have to figure this out another time, because I'm still not savvy in this. But according to the Heterodox Academy, there are some universities where you are seeing 60-to-1 ratios. There are some universities that have nobody in their faculty even willing to register as a Republican, let alone holding conservative ideals. So you're seeing this massive split today. Well, that is a direct product of what started in the 1940s and 50s. And so around the 1940s and 50s, it was realized that the school system, if as a foreign entity, if I can take over another country's school system, I can destroy their country without ever having to fire a shot. I can destroy their culture. I can sow division and derision throughout the entirety of their base. And it's all I have to do is get into their school system. And it is very easy when all you have to do to get into the school system is pretend like you agree with certain ideals, and you'll be welcomed with open arms. And so in about the 1950s into the 1960s, the KGB specifically made a gigantic push to start putting their agents in our school system, in our universities, and from our universities to push them into our public school system as teachers and everything. So, and this is very well documented. All you have to do is Google like KGB agents in American academia, and you'll get a whole list of acknowledged KGB agents. And we're not talking like, James Bond level. We're talking what you're actually going to see as someone who is a school teacher, who is trained as a school teacher, who also happens to be desperately in love with their country and willing to do whatever it is to destroy their enemies. That is what we're talking about. And so you have these ideas. It started with Marxism, but about the 1940s and 50s, it was realized, especially by a lot of Marxist economists, that this doesn't really work. And the Marxist economists didn't really acknowledge it, but basically everyone else saw it for what it was. They're like, no, there's no way Marxism can work. It does not work economically. There's too many barriers in the form of just human nature that would prevent Marxism from ever being successful, specifically in our countries. And what they realized is that you can still do a Marxist takeover. It's not going to happen on the economic side, but it can definitely happen on the cultural side. And about the same time was a man named Herbert Marcuse, Herbert Marcuse, was espousing what has become known as critical theory, which is, it looks at the meta narratives behind things that Marx noticed in class structures like that. It goes beyond the economic, beyond seizing the means of production, to the actual human nature behind these class differences and these class structures that exist, and looks at everything from the basis of, our natural perceptions are just meta narratives constructed by societies. There is no objective truth. There's only perceptions, which there is validity to that statement. There is some things, but his ideas kind of went beyond anything that I would really agree with, such as one of his most famous being the intolerance of the intolerance of intolerance. To have a truly tolerant society, you have to be intolerant of intolerance. So it's the paradox of a tolerant society. In his mind, requires intolerance to succeed. Thoughts that you disagree with, or that you think might potentially hurt your society, are not allowed to be spoken. So that's a Marxist idea, is getting behind the state and everything like that. But what critical theory brought to the table was a tool to undermine commonly held meta narratives, by which I mean narratives that are constructed through myth and through storytelling and all these other things, such as the meta narrative of our founding, the founding fathers, that kind of stuff. So, because these are all actually meta narratives, they don't actually represent the objective truth. There is, you provide the foundation to undermine everything, and that was then taken and developed into what you see as critical race theory, where rather than saying, where rather than saying, these meta narratives don't exist, blah, 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 you say all these meta narratives ignore the fact that racism is the true meta narrative on everything. And it's not, critical race theory and critical theory. It's a rough bastardization of the actual critical theory. Not to say that critical theory was any good, but what it represents is a tool, and you can use this tool to prey on specifically the most potent of the facets of human nature, if you will, and that is our emotion. And through critical theory, you can start using emotional ploys to destroy and destabilize a society. Now, famously, in 1984, a man named Yuri Brezmenov, a KGB agent, outlined the fact that the KGB was doing this. He outlined their play. He said it takes generations to enact. You start with demoralization. You make people feel bad about their country. You make people feel bad about the way, their perceptions of things. You feel guilty for thinking things are good, even though I feel guilty because I'm happy to be an American in this time, even though there's black people and brown people suffering in our country. Therefore, I'm a horrible person. It's using that kind of demoralization, those kinds of demoralization tactics in conjunction with, um, you know, let's see, you know what? I have it right here. It's a four-step process. You use demoralization, you infiltrate the education system, and then begin teaching this demoralized version of America. You move to destabilization. He describes this as a quote, 2 to 5 year period, targeting the essential structural elements of a nation, the economy, foreign relations, and defense systems. This basically, the subverter, Russia, would look to destabilize every one of those areas in the United States, considerably weakening it. And you see this, right? We see this every day. These tactics are being put into use through our education system, and they are being used to weaponize future generations. Because when it is mandated by the government that every student between the ages of 5 and 18 must participate in this same activity every day, day on day, except for a couple weeks in the summer, even though that's even being taken away, it gives you all the opportunity in the world, if you are a KGB agent, to start putting terrible, pernicious, destructive thoughts into everyone's head. And then you send them off to a university system where there is 60 to 1 ratio of in some schools of liberal to conservative. And I'm not even conservative as a libertarian anarchist, like I'm always the 0.1% of any representation. So, you know, this is coming purely from the side of, I don't believe that one side or the other having inordinate amounts of power is any good for anyone. So the fact that the Democratic Party and the left has such a monopoly on the monopoly, to me, is the biggest danger, is the biggest threat. And um, I think that it's important to acknowledge that this isn't just conspiracy theory stuff. This is acknowledged by the very agents that were participating in it. There are books about how KGB agents or Russian assets within academia would then hire more Russian plants to then hire more Russian plants. It's a cascading effect. You're a liberal professor, all your assistants are liberal professors, all of their and they're all going to go on to be professors, and all their assistants are going to be liberal professors. You get this bias built in, and it's very easy to infiltrate because you're just a slightly more radical version than what they're professing. So you tone yourself down a little bit, they'll never know you're a KGB agent. You're saying the same stuff. All of a sudden you're in and you're pushing. Now you're adding a little sprinkle of America's the evil one. Now you're adding a little bit of sprinkle of, well, maybe what was going on in the Soviet Union and China wasn't the worst when you compare it to America. Now, that's where you start getting sprinkles of the whataboutism. Yeah, but what about, America does this, or what about, the people do this? And that combined with this necessary, as Murray Rothbard describes it, this necessary conjoining, or this necessary belief that we are the government. When you combine those two things, it's, this is how you seize control. And the school is the avenue to that control. The public school system, is the means by which they plant the seeds that will grow in tomorrow's trees of dissent and destruction within your society. Now, it all comes back to the idea of planting the tree of whose shade you will never enjoy, but future generations will. And that is what the KGB have done. In America, we are unfortunately plagued by such such short sightedness in almost all of our actions that the idea of looking at putting in place a plan now whose fruits will not be seen for 20 to 25 years is unfathomable. We have a political system that relies on a 2-year cycle for the majority of our legislators. You have to do something every 2 years. That the idea of a 5-year plan, let alone a 20-year plan, is just beyond comprehension. But when you look at something like Russia, where they are where specifically their government is very unified behind singular goals, especially when it comes to foreign relations, that a 25-year plan, it's like, oh, why the hell not? That's easy. We just got to start doing this, and in 25 years we'll have destroyed America. Yeah, all about that. Let's go. Um, and so we are seeing the fruits of it now. Granted, it takes a lot longer, and there's a lot of shifts in there. So that should explain kind of why it is, just in general, that the government monopoly on education is so vital, because it is the children now grow up to be the policymakers later, and if you can influence the soil that they are grown in, you can influence the shade they produce later. And the left, the Democratic Party, they see what's going on the public education side of things, and it makes them very happy, to say the least. They when it comes to the left and the Democratic Party, right? They benefit almost exclusively from the public education system. And what it provides is this perfect avenue to teach kids their entire time that the government is great, that the government is great, is always going to help you, it's always going to be there for you. You have to love the government. You have to hate these ideas. It doesn't teach that America was founded on beautiful individualist ideas that, though weren't fully lived out on its founding, would eventually be lived out through its development and evolution. You don't teach them that. You teach them that's a horrible, destructive, terrible place. And next thing you know, when an election comes along, all you have to do is say the other guy is racist, and you can mobilize this force behind whatever you tell them to win whatever election you need and maintain whatever power you want. So that's why the school is important. They acquiesce to everything that the school that teachers unions do, because unions are the single largest contributor to Democratic campaigns. So now you have a public education system that the political class has identified as key to maintaining their power. Next thing you have to do is figure out a way to control the people who control that institution, right? The teachers, the administrators. And just as an aside, if you thought the ratio of teachers in teaching was bad for conservative to liberal, administration, it's even worse. As this article puts it, it seems that, where did I find it? It's let's see. What you end up having is because the breakdown is about there's about 25% conservative students, 25% moderate, and 50% identify as liberal. So you have a 50% liberal student base being taught by an 80%, 80 to 90% liberal teaching base being governed by a 95% liberal administration. Administrations are 90 to 95% conservative. It's about 6% of university administration members actually identify as conservative, compared to 12% of teachers. So that should kind of tell you just how plagued this whole system is by the liberal bias. Now, when you then consider what the teachers unions are able to do, which is in exchange for us getting you elected, you're going to you're going to back us up. Now what you're seeing, and we've seen it demonstrated through COVID, teachers unions fighting tooth and nail to make sure teachers don't have to teach the students that they're being paid to teach. You've seen public school unions all across America, including the heads of public school unions, saying we're not going to go back to school unless, the kids are masked up, the kids are vaccinated. They're coming up with literally whatever excuse they can to get out of working, because the teachers unions don't work. They don't have the students' interests at heart. It's as that there was once a head of a teachers union that said, as soon as students start paying dues, I will be working for their best interests. Teachers unions do not work in the best interests of the students. In fact, they are the greatest obstacle to student flourishing, because it is the teachers unions that fight hardest to prevent charter schools and private schools and any kind of competition to the public school market from appearing. What's really ironic about all of this is that the conservative side desperately supports public education reform in the form of even the most equitable idea I can imagine policy-wise, right? The voucher system, declaring that all students, every kid is worth an equal amount of money in the eyes of funding, and you as a parent get to choose what school receives that funding via the presence of your child. Every student is treated the same, no matter their upbringing. They're all represented by the same dollar amount, and education is there. That is equity to a T. It is correcting for any kind of mismanagement your parents might have done in providing for you. It corrects for any kind of, awesomeness that your parents might have provided, and allows, underprivileged kids, underprivileged parents to send their child to a school that won't, like you see in Baltimore, finish off with a 1%, academic literacy rate. Why do the Democrats stand so staunchly against one of the most equitable things that possible, that the Republican side would be behind 100%? The party of equity is against it because it would strip them of power, and they know just how important power is. So all the reasons why it's important to the left are the same reasons why the education system is important to the right. But what needs to happen now is conservatives need to realize it doesn't matter what your policy is. It doesn't matter what your stance on welfare. None of that matters if the public school system is always run by the left. People say the biggest problem with a lot of states going from red to blue is the California transplants. I'm a California transplant. I left California because it fucking blows. Excuse my French. It turned into an absolute crap hole. There's the policy in it has ruined it, and it is unless Larry Elder is elected, I do not see California going anywhere good anytime soon. Right. The problem is most people leaving California are thinking that way, and most people leaving California are going to these red states, fully meaning to never vote in the same policies. In fact, I like to point this out to people who say California transplants are the reason Texas is going blue. If it wasn't for California transplants, Beto O'Rourke would have beaten Ted Cruz in the most recent senatorial election. What happens is, and it's the same with immigrants. You see it with Mexican immigrants. They come across, they bring their children, they work their ass off, they do menial jobs, specifically knowing that no matter how crappy my current job is, I am giving my child a better chance at a better life in the future by being in America. Doing a crappy job in America means my child is more likely to succeed in the future and be better than anything I could have had in my previous country. Well, what happens is that much like the California transplants, right? Their kids end up in the public education system. So for the California transplants, your kids are, your red parents are sending their kids to a blue school to be taught by blue teachers, and they're wondering why their students are blue. Their kids are blue. So coming out of high school, you have a massive voter block that is, according to the statistics right now, I know like people like myself have liked to say that Gen Z is the most conservative generation in a long time. It is not. 19% of Gen Z is conservative, 41% is liberal, and about 39% is moderate. So Gen Z is very liberal. they are less conservative than previous generations. And what does that mean? That means right out of the gates, from that age of 18 to like 25 at the minimum, you have a group of people who all you have to do is play the emotional fiddle, and they are going to go out and vote for whatever you want. And that is why states like Colorado are now blue. That is why places like Texas appear to be going purple. It is because of the public education system. What is the response? What can be done? Be more involved. If you are a community member and you don't have kids in the public school, you still have a right to have your voice heard, because that public school is educating the future members of your community. You have a right to voice about what you think should be taught in your community schools. If you are a parent, you have even more of a right. You have the right of a freaking parent to dictate the terms of your child. The state has already recognized that you as a parent have almost complete autonomy in the decisions of your child. They don't even have. You have more rights, more say in their life than they have. You have every right to be heard on what you think they should be listening to, what you think they should be taught. These moves to get cameras and stuff in public classrooms. I've seen people, the pushback from the left, like, isn't that just like the spy state, whatever? No, these are publicly funded jobs. They demand transparency. They deserve transparency. And I have every right to know what is going on with my public dollars in a classroom. Freedom of speech does not give the government or its employees the right to say whatever they want, especially on the government's time. In your free time, when you are not working and earning my tax dollars that I probably don't really pay because, I'm just a poor college student, but the imaginary tax dollars that I know I paid when I was in the military, right? If you are, I have a right to be able to dictate what is happening, what my tax dollars are being used for. Okay? Like, the idea that teachers have the same level of freedom of speech as we as individuals in the classroom is false. Government employees do not get to be biased in their actions. They are required. You have to be unbiased, and that's very difficult, which is why competition must exist. So the left stands against the competition in the education market, the voucher system, the charter school system, because it provides, it is a threat to their monopoly on the education system. And we're already running past our time today. I try to keep these at around a half an hour. I know it's still a little bit disjointed, and I am going to clarify most likely on tomorrow's episode. I'm still looking through some more of Thomas Sowell's Charter Schools and Her Enemies. I've already, done quite a grip of reading in it, but there's always more to be found. I strongly recommend that. I strongly recommend books like The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt and stuff. But if you are a conservative, if you are a Republican, if you are anyone who is worried about where this, especially, by the way, especially libertarians, this should go without saying, we don't, but if you are concerned about where our public education system is going and what is happening with it, do not stop fighting. Fight for local school board elections. You have every right, even if you don't have a kid in the school, to be a part of that board. Fight for those local school elections. Fight against teachers' unions. Fight to help charter schools gain access in inner cities where they are prevented from existing, basically. So I think on the next episode, I'm really going to dive into what's going on, the actual statistics behind the public education system and its failures compared to stuff like the charter school system. This episode, I really just kind of wanted to give you an overview on the ideas behind why it's so important to take back academia, the university system and stuff like that. Give you a little bit of a history and the backstory of why our public education system got where it was. So thank you guys again for joining me today on Common Nonsense. I will be here again tomorrow. I'm trying to come up with a more set time on these, but as my school schedule creeps up, I'll have to, that'll be a big dictator in when these episodes come out. So bear with me on that. For more content, go to libertyrevoltmedia.com. Listen to me at 9 o'clock Wednesday mornings here at KHNC 1360 if you're in Northern Colorado, or go on to KHNC 1360KHNC.com to listen to it live. Like I said, every Wednesday from 9 till 10, I'll be on there with Jacked Up with Jason Walker. Go check out our CBD, Liberty Organics, certified good, certified great. And yeah, thanks again, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day.